power might succeed where the politicians have failed in reunifying the island. Ever since border restrictions were lifted there last month, the people have been voting with their feet. Today there were signs of movement on the political front too, with the first visit by Turkey's new Prime Minister, Erdogan. He said that Turkey was prepared to lift its trade ban with the Greek side of the island as long as Greece reciprocated. Cheering crowds, flags, traditional dancing. Turkey's leader got a hero's welcome when he arrived in Cyprus today, and all eyes are on Erdogan. Could this be the man to break decades of deadlock over the division of the island?
The time has come for the embargoes which have imprisoned the Turkish Cypriot people for the past 40 years to be lifted once and for all. This is the most urgent issue for Cypriots.
This is the man Erdogan must convince, the 78-year-old Turkish Cypriot leader, Ralph Denktaş. He's devoted his entire life to fighting the Greeks. Mr. Denktaş said no to a deal with the Greek Cypriots in March. In spite of huge international pressure and the carrot of European Union membership, he still rejected a UN plan to reunify the island. The deal proposed by the UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan went like this. Cyprus would become a Swiss-style confederation of component states. It would be headed by a rotating presidency. Territorial handovers would see Turkish Cypriot land shrink from 34% to just over 28% of the island. But a deal could not be reached. But if this is anything to go by, the Turkish Cypriot people do want a deal. Tens of thousands of them attended this giant rally, the biggest ever seen in Nicosia earlier this year. They want change, an end to partition and isolation, and a new future in the European Union. They damned Mr. Denktaş for his intransigence, but he was unimpressed.
These demonstrations, where in the earth have you seen a political matter to be discussed and settled in the streets?
But that may be exactly what's happening now. Last month, in a surprise move, Denktaş lifted border controls into the Turkish side of the island, prompting a wave of people to flood across the UN-patrolled Green Line. A staggering 1/3 of the entire population of Cyprus has now made the trip. Officials at the border can't cope. For 29 years of separation, scenes like this were unthinkable. So could people power bring the change the island's politicians have failed to deliver?
What you're starting to see is much, or more or less, the parallel of what we saw in Germany at the end of the Cold War. What we're seeing now really resembles the fall of the Berlin Wall. And in essence, I would say that the fences of the Green Zone in Cyprus will come crashing down much the same way as the concrete of the Berlin Wall came down at the end of the Cold War.
All the signs are that many Cypriots have now got a taste for travel, and millions of dollars have been traded across the border. That would bring a measure of prosperity to the Turkish side, where the contrast in wealth from the Greeks' culture of cafes and cappuccino could not be starker. Having unlocked the door, the politicians may decide they can never again slam it shut. Well, to discuss those issues in more details, I'm joined in the studio by Artun Gökçen of the London Turkish Gazette and Leonidas Leonidou, chairman of the Federation of Greek Cypriot Refugees in the UK. We spoke to them on the programme in November when the UN presented its plan for Cyprus. Now, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Gökçen, because you've just got back from Cyprus, and you were there indeed, were you not, on the Turkish side when they lifted the border restrictions. So just tell us what it was like.
Yeah, coincidentally, I was in Cyprus when the borders were opened. And it was amazing. It was unbelievable. We didn't believe when we heard the news. And the decision was made, and the next day, after 2 days, people started crossing the borders. And no one believed that people would walk in masses on both sides. And in 1 week, we saw 150,000 people crossing the borders. And now the numbers, I believe,
what was the atmosphere like? Because, I mean, was there hostility? Was there warmth?
Well, the first day, I was in Lisi, Akdoğan, which was a Greek Cypriot village before 1974. My family lives in this village. And the first day when the Greek Cypriots started coming, they were confused. They didn't know what they were going to find, how they were going to see their old places. And they were a bit scared when they came. The first day when I saw a father and son, they came to our street, and we were in the garden, sitting in the garden. And they came and they knocked on a door next to us. There was no one in. And they drove down towards us. And I got up and I looked at the plate number of the car. From the plate number, you could tell that they were Greek Cypriots. And I said, "Kalos orisete." And they were puzzled. I said, "Welcome. Where are you looking for?" "We were looking, that one is our home," he said.
So a pretty warm reception. But what was the impact for the Greek Cypriots of all this?
Well, obviously we welcome any move that brings down the boundaries and brings down the walls of division of the island. And also these amazing dramatic events have demolished the argument of Mr. Denktash, on which he based the partition of the island for 30 years, that the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots cannot live together. However, on the other hand, we object strongly to the fact that we have to show our passports in order to cross over and see our properties, as you were in a foreign land, and visit our places and our villages, and we do not consider that this is the solution.
Well, yes, presumably that's why this whole thing has to be settled. Now, as you said, it does seem to be being held up by Ralph Denktash. But, Mr. Gökçen, do you think this visit by the Turkish Prime Minister today will have any impact?
Well, first of all, by opening the borders, the Turkish Cypriot administration, including Denktash, has shown that they want some progress to happen. Although they were opposing the Annan plan, everybody believes that Annan plan is coming in step by step. And the Turkish government has expressed their keen to solve the Cyprus problem, as we saw on the TV a few moments ago. They want to solve the Cyprus problem. And I think that this is a new era. The opening of the borders is bringing the two communities together, and people are talking, people are discussing, people are coming into contact after 30 years, which is very, very important. The politicians have not succeeded to bring the communities together, but the communities are coming together.
Now, since I talked to you both, I think it was about 6 months ago, are you now more optimistic that actually we will see the reunification of Cyprus?
We are skeptical in that Mr. Denktash walked away from the negotiating table 2 months ago, and he denied the Turkish Cypriots the opportunity to join the European Union with the rest of Cyprus. Now, this we see maybe as an attempt to recognize, to get a side recognition of the illegal regime, maybe an attempt to get out of the economical stagnation that he has driven the Turkish Cypriot community. It could be an attempt...
So he's just trying to show willing, is what you're saying?
It could be also an attempt to deflate the strong opposition from the political parties of the Turkish Cypriot parties in view of the coming elections.
So a complicated political manoeuvre, do you think, by Mr. Denktash? Because he's a bit of a wily old fox, isn't he?
Well, we have to leave aside skepticism, I think, and take the positive sides forward. And I'm optimistic because I saw the people, the ordinary people. They didn't listen whether they were going to cross with passports or they were going to stay in hotels, or they just wanted to come together and show to the politicians that we can come together, we can discuss our issues, and we can move forward.
Just very briefly.
Our dream, of course, is to create a reunited Cyprus, that it will be free for all the Cypriots, the Turkish Cypriots to have the right to return to their homes, the Greek Cypriots to go back to their homes and live like free citizens of Europe. That is our dream, and we hope that this will be realized in a Cyprus free from troops, occupation troops, free from settlers, just for the people of Cyprus, that they can move freely and enjoy the freedom that the rest of the Europeans enjoy.
Let's hope so, Mr. Leonidou and Mr. Gökçen. Thank you very much for joining me once again. Well, before we go, let's take a look at our main stories.